Hi! Although you won't find the definition of drawback in a dictionary as it pertains to string clamps, here's the best way I can define it. Here I have a couple examples of drawback, and this is on my Prince P7000 machine. This is an old video, so I apologize for the quality of the video. So drawback occurs when you tension a string and you clamp onto it. Right there, I'm just pointing out the how close the clamp is to the frame. But you'll notice that when I release the tension from the string that's in the tension head, you'll see the clamp move right there. And that's drawback right there. And I was noticing on the main strings, it was averaging between 1 to 2 millimeters of drawback. I'm here on the crosses, and after I tension the string here, you're going to notice that I clamp onto the string. But to measure drawback on the cross strings, I'm going to be using that wooden clothespin, and I'm making it right flush to that green string right there. And basically I'm just going to point out that there's no gap right now. Right there, there's no gap. But when I release the tension from that string, you'll notice that the clamp will move along with the clothespin there, right there, slightly to the left, and it left a little gap there. So on the cross strings, it was averaging between 0 to 1 millimeter of drawback. This is my Babolat Evolution Tour, and when installing the mains, I'll be clamping off here, and you'll notice that the clamp got right up to that grommet barrel, which is good. So you'll be able to see the drawback right there. And I was noticing it was averaging between 2 to 3 millimeters on the main strings. On the crosses, I did the same thing with the clothespin, so I'll insert it there. And when I took measurements on the cross strings, it was less. It was between 1 to 2 millimeters of drawback. Now that I've defined and demonstrated what drawback is, I want to thank my colleagues and industry leaders that contributed information that made this video possible. Alright, let's take a deep dive and discuss drawback. If you've been stringing rackets for a while, you may have used or learned on one of these type of lockout machines. And this is the Prince Neos 1000. Back in the day, it was known as an echelon machine. Although these machines are not being manufactured anymore, I know that a bunch of you are still using this machine, so I didn't want to leave you guys out. One of the unique features of this lockout machine is its simple clamping system. So you'll notice that this clamp is attached to a bar, and this is a glide bar where this clamp can slide back and forth. And as you clamp on each of the mains, this glide bar will move back and forth. And when you install the crosses, you simply just remove the glide bar, insert it back into the turntable, and then you can clamp this way. So with this clamping system, you can clamp at a 90-degree angle, but you can't swivel around like today's modern clamps. I will be taking some measurements of drawback on my Prince Neos 1000, and you can see that I'm preparing the clamps by cleaning them thoroughly. And I can't stress enough that this should be done on all machines to avoid any kind of slippage and reduce drawback. Speaking about string clamp slippage, I posted another video on that topic, and that's what I'm checking for here. So with that clothespin next to the clamp, after I release tension, I'm just making sure that there's no gap between the clothespin and the clamp. So there wasn't any on that first pull on that string on the right. So now you can see I'm pulling the string on the left and making sure that I check it early on, because before I check for drawback, I have to make sure that the clamps are not slipping. Now that I've established that there's no slippage in my clamps, I can check for drawback. And you can see that I'm on the right side of the frame. And after I clamp off here, I have my ruler ready. I'm going to take the measurement between the string clamp and the frame. And I had to check it more than once just to make sure that I was looking at the right measurement. So after I released tension, I was noticing an average of about 1 millimeter of drawback. So I went ahead and made sure that I checked both sides, and it did confirm that that was the case. Here I'm on the crosses, and you can see that I'm using the clothespin again to take a reading on any kind of drawback. And what was really impressive was that on each of the pulls, there was 0 drawback on all of the crosses. I guess you can say that this video was 4 years in the making. It was about that time that I contacted JC Carpentier. He's the owner of Tennis Machines Incorporated. And when I asked him about Drawback, here's what he had to say. I know exactly what you're referring to, and I think it has to do with the tolerance of the string clamp in the post and the way the clamp is secured on the rail. Also, the material that is used in the casting process, I believe, makes some machines sturdier than others. Because the neo string clamp is secured to a bar and not having to slide the clamp up in the post means you don't have any of that tilting, which I think is why it rocks. When a clamp is up high and not secured at the bottom, it sort of tilts back. So that was his take on Drawback. Now fast forward 3 years later. As some of you may know, I replaced my Prince P7000 with the Babolat Evolution Tour. Like most machines, they have rotating swivel clamps, and the clamp itself sits on a base where then it can be locked into place. However, one of the things I did notice about the Babolat Evolution Tour was the amount of string clamp drawback. So then I decided to do some research. I contacted some of my colleagues and enlisted their help, and I would like to thank all of them for providing some of this information that I'll share with you. Albert Lee from Potomac, Maryland, Matthew from Sterling, Illinois, Roger Gough from Davis, California, Sam Chan from Berwick, Victoria, Australia, and Tim Strawn from Roanoke, Virginia. I listed their contact information in the video description in case you're in their neck of the woods and would like to enlist their help with racket services. As I mentioned earlier, it was the drawback that drew my attention, but there was another thing that stood out, which I'll share in this chart. So here's what I noticed. It was the string clamp rail distance. And what I mean by that is the distance from the string clamp rail to where the clamp has to reach up and clamp onto the strings. And the way I measured it is from the string clamp rail to the support arms, and you'll see that where it forms the letter V right in the middle, and that's how I figured out this distance. So I got 8.5 on that. Now, so I asked my colleagues to measure what that was on their machines, and here's what I got. Oh, and I did put the Neos 1000 up there just to have it there, but that's not going to factor into this this part here. So the Babolat Racket Station, which is, I'm not surprised, it's pretty much the same machine. It was the first generation of the Evolution Tour, so that one's also 8.5. Then we have the Yonex ES5 ProTech, and that one came in at 7 5/8. Then my old Prince P7000, which was 7 inches. And we have the Technofiber Ergo Pro, just under 7 inches, so I just put 7 there. And then I had someone also give me the distance for the Wilson Bayardo, so that's all 7 right there. So now let's take a look at the second readings that I asked everyone to take, and it was the amount of drawback. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just take a look at this one at a time. So again, if we go back to the Neos 1000, just as a comparison, you can see how short that string clamp rail distance is, although it's a different clamping system. But you had the 1 millimeter drawback on the mains and 0 on the crosses. So on my machine, this is what I noticed was that drawback was this amount, that 2 to 3 millimeters, and the 1 to 2 on the crosses. So if we take a look at other machines here, the Racket Station came out pretty similar. I mean, 2.5 is right in that range there, and I got 2 here. And now let's take a look at this Yonex. So what I thought it would be interesting, what was interesting here is that you notice how this is less. So I noticed that the drawback was a little bit less. So this came down to 1 to 2 on both the mains and crosses. Then here's my old Prince P7000, and that's at 7 inches, so even shorter distance. And this is where I got the 1 to 2 and the 0 to 1 and the crosses. Then we have a Technofiber Ergo Pro that's also right under 7 inches, but I rounded it off. So that one we got similar readings. We got 2 millimeters here and 1 to 2. But you'll notice that on all of these machines, the cross drawback is less. And then finally, I didn't have the numbers on the Wilson biometer, but I'm thinking it's probably going to be in this range. So let's say with all things created equal, a shorter distance would mean less movement in the string clamps, resulting in less drawback. But here's another way you can look at this. With the Babolat Evolution Tour coming in at 8.5 inches in string clamp rail distance, it's actually the drawback angle which makes drawback more noticeable. And on the Prince P7000 at 7 inches, again, it's the drawback angle, in this case, making it less noticeable. Well, so what do you think I did next? I wasn't satisfied, so I contacted John Lyons, the Babolat project manager of professional devices, explained my theory, and here's what he had to say. Regarding your answer about drawback, well, I think there is a little bit more drawback to evolution. Some of this movement, as you rightly say, is a bit of an illusion because the bottom of the clamp base is further from the string bed than any other machine. More parts are used in this low friction system, and each connection adds a tiny bit of movement. Do you wish there was less apparent drawback? Sure, but I wouldn't give up the super effortless movement to get little less drawback. He went on to say that you can reduce the drawback slightly by slightly increasing the pressure of the clamp base during locking. But the trade-off there is that it takes more pressure to lock and unlock the base. Well, I was happy with that explanation. Remember earlier when I mentioned that with all things created equal? Well, Sam Chan made an interesting comment that supported this idea of minimizing drawback. He said, we all understand any stringing machine clamps will bend under tension depending on how good the make of machines. Some say, why worry about it? When you pull the next string, the clamp will bend it back. But I believe there will be some loss in there. Of course, we need to look at how tightly the tube and the rod fit together. And that is how good the maker is. He also mentioned that raising the string clamp rails on a machine would be the best way to reduce drawback, which he has done on his machine. And coincidentally, Albert, Roger, and Matthew all shared the same take on this idea. With all this talk about drawback, one would think this cannot be a good thing when trying to produce accurate tension on a string job. Well, have no worries, this discussion of drawback is only half the picture. I'll share another occurrence in episode 2 called Revealed Recovery to the Rescue. Thanks for watching. Happy stringing. And let your machine play. If you're a stringy geek like I am, here's a cool gadget. It's a ERT300 and it's a string tension device that can measure actual string tension. Now what it does is you place it onto a string bed of a racket and it electronically sends micro vibrations into the strings that simulates the ball impact. And from that you get a reading which is called dynamic tension. So I'll show you 4 practical ways that you can use the ERT300. So I have a bunch of rackets here, and for this first test, these 2 rackets I just got from clients that I've never strung for, and strings, and I don't know what reference tension they use. So, and I get this question asked once in a while, is like, what do you think what the tension is on that? So I'm gonna just try and see what I think it is, just based on just hitting it on my hand. And it always helps to know what it was strung at originally, but I'm gonna guess this one is at 42. So I'll go ahead and place the ERT300, and basically you're gonna center it on the string bed. So I'm gonna go ahead and count up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'll place it above the 10th string, and basically you're just gonna turn it on. It takes about 5 seconds to come out with a reading, and it's coming out at 30 right there. Now that's not the actual tension. So again, that 30 is a DT reading. So I'm gonna go ahead and, it has a conversion chart. So I'll go ahead and pull it up here. And at 30, it's saying it's at 44 pounds. So that was pretty close. I may have gotten lucky. So let me just try another one here. I have this other racket. This was my backup in case I wasn't close on that first one. So this is an interesting hybrid setup. So I'm going to say this one's a little tighter. Let's go 46 on this one. So I'll go ahead and place it in the middle. And depending on the strings, it does read differently. And I'll talk more about that later. So let's go ahead and see what the other one had, a 30 DT. Oh, okay, so this one's at 27. So much for my predicting what this tension is. So at 27 DT, we're looking at 40 pounds. All right. It sure sounds tighter, but again, it might be because of the gauge of the string. So that's one way you can measure the actual tension on a racket. Now the second way you can do it is when you're trying to track consistency in your string jobs. And I take a reading right after it comes off the stringing machine. So this is a racket that I just strung. And what I'm hoping for is that this will read at 34 DT. So I'm going to go ahead and place it here. And I do log it down in my records because I want to make sure that my DT reading is plus or minus 1 unit. So yeah, it's right there. So it's always nice when it's right on the number I'm shooting for. So in case you're wondering what 34 DT is, that would come out to 49 pounds. And I did string this at 50-48. It's a hybrid setup of polyester and synthetic gut. All right, the third purpose for this that you can use it for is to check the health status of a strings if I strung it before. So like I mentioned earlier, I always measure the initial DT. So on these two rackets, I had one is 37 and this one's at 38 DT. So let's go ahead and take a reading on this one. And this one was strung 28 about 5 months ago. So, and this is a polyester setup here on the mains and crosses. So I'll go ahead and place it here. So this is the one at 37 DT. So right now it's coming out at 31. So what I'm going to do with that number is I'm going to track tension loss. So basically I'm just going to take the difference, which is 6 DT units, divide that by 37. And so it's coming out with 16% tension loss. And what the ART 300 recommends is that whenever the tension loss reaches 10% and a maximum of 20%, you really should restring your racket. So that 16% is right in that range there. So I'm glad that my client brought it in. All right, so in this fourth application, what you can do with a DT is you can determine when you go from one head size to another, and it does depend on the string and the string pattern. But anyway, when you're going from one head size to another, you can figure out what tension will match the DT, because the DT will reflect how it feels when you're hitting it. So you really want to make sure you know what your DT number is. So let's take, for example, these two rackets at 37 and 38. This is a 98 head size and with a 16-19 string pattern. Now this racket is similar. This is a 98 with a 16-19. And I strung this with a similar setup with a polyester. But at 48 pounds, this one came out with a 33 DT. So if I were to try to match the DT of this to these rackets, what I would do is go up 4 pounds, go up to 52. And I'm guessing it might come closer. Well, it should come closer to what it is here. But yeah, I would string it up, take a reading, and if it's at 37, 38, then I know that at least the DT matches up. So it'll give you a similar feel, but you can see that stringing this at 52 and let's say that one at 56. That's the goal, is to match the DT, not so much the actual reference tension. So anyway, those are 4 ways that you can use the ERT 300. Now, if you'd like to purchase one of these, I do have an affiliate link. So if you use it, you get 10% off the regular price. So just go to ert300.com and use the code AMStringing. Mahalo for your support, and let your strings play.